Welcome to Resilience Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Osterlink. This show is about building better humans, institutions, and systems. On the show, I'll be interviewing many different experts from across many different fields, including human optimization, health and fitness, team building, mind-body medicine. In the institutional space, we're looking at different institutions and how we can create new ones, new models and maps, including in medicine, in education, in intelligence community, in law enforcement, in the military, especially in the special operations community. Thanks for being here and enjoy the show.
Beth Sparks is a licensed clinical social worker, trauma-informed clinician, and integration coach with a focus on deep healing and personal transformation. She is trained in modalities such as EMDR and psychedelic-assisted therapy integration and brings a compassionate, grounded approach to helping clients process trauma, expand self-awareness, and reconnect to a more authentic way of living. Beth combines clinical expertise with a holistic perspective, supporting individuals in navigating both the psychological and emotional dimensions of growth and healing. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Michael. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. I enjoyed our original conversation. I'm really happy to have you on to talk about the work that you do, especially as a trauma-informed therapist in the psychedelic space. It's, we could talk offline. It's like, it's an old and new thing, and there's a lot there.
Mhm.
But before we get into what you're personally doing and the approach that you take, tell me, Beth, like what led you to become a clinical social worker, get trained in more in the trauma approach, especially in the psychedelic space?
I'm excited to share that part because I feel like it just every step led into another step for me to eventually, be where I presently am. I'd really have to go back to being an active duty Marine and that sense of service and a sense of commitment to something greater than myself. And after leaving active duty, was in my personal life growing myself educationally and found myself in positions where I could support other people and found that I seemed to naturally lean into these different types of roles, which eventually led me to pursuing a master of social work, and with the idea of clinical practice. And really, what drew me into the clinical social work specific framework was the person and environment, client centered approach, acknowledging all of the different factors that influence how a person shows up on any given day. And to include psychological, social, emotional, economic, all of it, and helping that be the picture, the container, so to speak, for how I would eventually start meeting with clients and helping people, guiding people. So I moved into trauma focused work, specifically with military veterans and their families, and grew incredibly within that space, fostered by just some incredible role models and also the clients. I mean, let's be clear, incredible population to work with. You talk about resilience. Um,
Yeah.
so many of them just have it in spades. And so it was, my privilege that I was able to work with them in different ways in different settings. Coming out of that, some personal background. My husband was also an active duty Marine, special operations, and was struggling with mental health concerns. And being the therapist, what do we do? Like we look for resources, especially the social worker, right? Doing what we could, therapy, just different styles of therapy, like just whatever we could to try and support him through his healing. And nothing really seemed to help and couldn't figure out why. But it just left us in this place where we felt like we were just sort of spinning and didn't know where to turn. Um, and also we were beginning to just sort of lose hope, become really disheartened heartened with the process and what was available. A friend of my husband's reached out and essentially, it's kind of a, hey, I did this retreat in Mexico. I think it saved my life. You should check it out. So it led us to research it, and it was psychedelic assisted therapy in Mexico, which was a hard left turn, especially coming from, I mean, coming from the background of, we're Marines. And so it's really drilled into us that, the drugs are not on the menu, of any kind. And so, but we were open because, we were just at a place where we're like, look, we've tried everything. Let's just check it out. Let's have a conversation. Does it seem legitimate? Is it, what does the container look like, the set and setting of it, right? All of those things. And it just continued to check all of the boxes and got us to the point where we looked at each other and we're like, let's give it a shot. He's jumped out of airplanes, been shot at, explosions, the whole thing. What's a little psychedelic medicine? Right? Just kind of like that was the place that we were at.
Yeah.
So, I would say desperate, is a great word to capture it. He went through, the retreat, came back, and I went through the retreat, about 5 weeks later. So we both ended up going through the psychedelic, medicine retreat in Mexico. Having
Did you all use?
It was ibogaine and 5-MeO DMT. So, what was a significant factor for my husband was suicidal ideation. And when he came back from the retreat, it was just not an option. It was no longer in the drop down menu. It felt silly, right? Along with other traumatic, painful childhood experiences that he, was able to navigate and process in a really deep and powerful way that brought about other healing
Yeah.
changes, in the present. Similarly, like I went through my own journey, and came out, and although our journeys were different, our integrations were different, um, it brought me to, just this place where I had an unshakable, um, thought of this can't just be it. Like like there has to be more to this. How do I figure out how to bridge like the therapeutic model, the current therapeutic model, and this psychedelic medicine
Hmm.
base, right?
Hmm.
I went to this retreat and they did it beautifully. Like the clinical, medical, along with the ceremonial, was beautifully balanced. Um, and really that became my integration plan. Like part of my integration plan was like, I can't shake this. Like I'm
Okay.
working on personal level healing and releasing old pain and that kind of thing. Healthy habits, all of that. But at the same time, there's just sort of this, you got to keep asking. And I felt completely alone because, I worked in a pretty standard, straightforward therapeutic setting, right? So nobody's talking about psychedelics. And so it took me digging, and quite a bit, and finally just signing myself up to go to, a conference, a professional conference centered around psychedelic medicine. Showed up all by myself, and just dove in, meeting people, hearing stories all over the world, in all of these different settings, people just like me that were like, you know what, I work in, hospice care.
Yeah.
And I've been, just fascinated with this topic, or I work with veterans that are struggling with TBI or PTSD, or, it kind of, just fill in, an example, and they were all represented, which really gave me some energy, some
Yeah.
some boost to pursue, a coaching, certificate in psychedelic coaching, for psychedelic integration. In addition to my therapeutic framework, building on that. And then I was asked to coach, for the organization I went through the retreat, in Mexico with. And so I've been able to build, yes, a coaching business, but also really building, I consider this part of my own integration.
Nice.
As it just like years later, I'm still integrating,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
Which I think is a testament to the power of integration
Yeah.
and the role that it plays. And it's not like a destination, that we just arrive, but it's something that each one of us are working on, whether we realize it or not. And so it's sort of like the decision of, are we going to be intentional with this? How are we going to frame this?
I definitely want to dive into the integration. You mentioned really important. And you and I've talked about this offline, but I'm curious, what did you learn about the psyche during your own experience that you did not know when you went to graduate school studying the psyche?
Great question. So, if I had to start to capture it, how much like I knew, like there's intellectually what we're taught and what I knew going in versus actually experiencing it. I know that the way that we interact today is a sum total of our experiences, things like our family of origin. Some things we can't control for, some things we can. But this informs how we are showing up today. And I mean, I knew that going in, but then actually going through my own journey where I went back into my own very early childhood and to a place that I mean, I'll be, I, unless I'm trying to imagine a scenario in a standard therapy setting where I would have been able to go back
Mm,
and actually um, retrace some of what that foundation was and actually notice where the cracks were,
mm,
that it wasn't where I thought it was, that it went back even further. And in some ways was um, far more simpler
mm,
than I realized. Like when I really thought about it, it was like kind of like, well, of course,
mm.
right? Of course, I would have begun to that would become my worldview.
Yeah.
And so for me, that I mean, that was extremely insightful, and that the different um, uh, snapshots that showed up for me, the different insights that showed up for me, affirming that. Also, affirming just the inner goodness
Mm,
that we all carry and we all have and we're all capable of.
mm,
And this idea that, like, I mean, my spiritually, as well as, emotionally, psychologically, entering to this like this unshakable knowing,
mm,
right? That we're all interconnected and we're all capable of incredible, beautiful things, but also really ugly things.
mhm.
Right. But it's part of our human experience. And that's something that we all share. And for me, that actually, I, I'm going to speak for myself, but I imagine other people feel the same way, where you feel like kind of tunneled in on your own experiences, and not in a necessarily like selfish way, but in um, a self-conscious
Mm,
type of self-centeredness, and allowing me to like that gave me the space to break out, and I kind of just and like really take in, zoom out, and take in my whole self, but then also how I'm relating to other people, how I'm showing up for the ones I love.
nice. So very parts of it were very transpersonal and
Yes.
how about the body for you? Did this
So
somatic sense? What did you learn about yourself that way?
so I had a pretty somatic experience with the medicine, and I think it's like it encouraged safety. And that was something that it hadn't occurred to me because I exercise, I'm fit, I take eat vegetables, things like that, right? I check all the boxes. It didn't really occur to me that I wasn't actually going inward. I wasn't curating or even anything that looked close to um, creating safety
Mhm,
within my own body. And that was my insight from my journey, was this, like, not only drawing my attention to, like, to be in my body, in myself, but that I can create safety. I don't have to be afraid of that. And
yeah.
that our bodies are vessels, they have memory. And, sometimes that memory needs to be worked with and released. And sometimes it's just a beautiful thing just to acknowledge something as simple as your breath and marvel at the divine nature of breath.
Love that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That is awesome. When you're studying a certification as a psychedelic practitioner,
Hmm.
imagine the somatic and the transpersonal aspects were included in the training.
Yes.
When you're studied as a social worker, I imagine it will necessarily, I don't know what school you went to, but generally speaking,
Yeah.
it probably was not. Is that accurate?
So
Or did you go to one of the,
no, I mean, not directly. I mean, I think it was acknowledged in my program, in terms of just, illness can show up in the body from
okay.
stress or, things of that nature. It was more of a direct impact. Like if you live in poverty and
Okay.
you can't purchase nutritious food, for instance,
Yeah.
you're more likely to be sick, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. That it's one thing to know as, kind of
Yeah.
intellectualize, think of as fact, but to actually feel what it's like when sad stays stuck in your body
Yeah.
or angry stays stuck in your
Yeah.
body and the impact that it can have on a person's, like, just how they're able to show up somatically. Um, and definitely there was minimal conversation around transpersonal, uh, what is it? Uh,
Because, you and I have talked about this, and the importance of what you do, the integration piece after someone
mhm,
has a session. But one of the concerns I think we've talked about in sharing common is that, if you look at the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual
mhm,
5, most of these states that you help people through are psychotic states. They're not recognized as
mhm.
spiritual experiences.
Right.
And like, what do you mean you can have experiences inside the in the
Mhm.
um, Jesus, I just lost my train. During conception, or
Yes.
things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you can't explain with the 5 or 6 senses of
Mhm.
body being that, like, temporally and geographically don't make sense space wise and time wise.
Right.
Like, just the weirdest things. And as more and more people do psychedelic medicines, hopefully in a proper setting, not always, unfortunately, and the bad things can occur if it's not a good setting. If you don't have clinicians who understand somatics and understand transpersonal states, I think you're creating the conditions culturally for a
Mhm.
lot of problems. And I just was curious on your take on that. And then we can definitely dive into the integration piece, which I think is so key.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really relevant question that you just asked. Right now, there are multiple state houses, state legislatures that are passing pro psychedelic research bills. Allowing researchers at incredible institutions to study the effects of plant medicine on pretty horrific um, scenarios like opioid
Yeah.
addiction and things like that. And so this is absolutely a relevant question to be asking because, okay, we do the research. What is considered true? What is considered notable? What is how do you measure somebody's spiritual transformation?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, just things of that nature. Certainly, there's measures like psychology measure type things, depression measures, that kind of thing that can be
Uh,
used. For that's incomplete. I think what really is going to be part of the conversation, hopefully, is how do we zoom out and we have to reframe a medicalized model of
yeah.
how we talk to people about spirituality, about their emotions, about their mental health. And who is this actually supporting?
Mm.
Is it supporting the clients and their benefit and their healing, or is it other organizations that really need the data metrics in order to, say, pay the bills? And so it's not to say one is, not to villainize, one side, but it's there needs to be a conversation around how can we bring this into a more full scope
Yeah.
so that when we are talking about it, we're not trying to go all the way over to one side,
Yeah.
right? Or all the way to the other. Because the vast majority of the people that I have worked with are right in the middle. They're
Yeah.
everyday folks that
Yeah.
have been going through some really hard things and they just want to feel better. They want to show up in their communities better. They want to be better parents, siblings, you name it. And so to me, that's the focus.
Love that. Yeah, you had mentioned that your husband's former Marine Special Operations.
Mhm,
I want to throw something out there and see if this is your experience as well. In my work with veterans, especially in the special operations community, a lot of the things that emerge during non-ordinary states
mhm,
are not the combat. It's an incident that occurred for them when they're 7 or 10 or 5 or 3
mhm,
when they're a
mhm,
young person, which then seems to set the stage for them wanting to be drawn towards not only the military, broadly speaking,
mhm.
but capacity to be in the special operations world. Have you noticed that as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's well documented by now. That like as special operators have gone through, or law enforcement, first responders have gone through the similar retreat that I went through. I mean, just the total sum of their traumatic experiences is it. I mean, it's significant. And what surprises them is when they go back to when they're 4, 5 years old, right? Where they experienced maybe chronic abuse, chronic neglect. And, there's different schools of thoughts, being formed on this. Is like, did that sort of help them essentially build the type of resilience that they needed in order to deal with just about anything as part of the special forces selection, or being deployed as an active member of a team, things like that, or in the law enforcement sense, being able to deal with like day after day of um, randomized trauma,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? And certainly there's some people that do that need the healing from recent history. But yes, there's many people that go through and they're surprised at what came up, at actually where the crack in the foundation,
Yeah,
so to speak, is. And in some cases, what the steps are for them to move into their healing.
yeah. Cool. Integration. Now,
Mhm,
I joked with you offline. I think we talked a while ago. I was in Austin, Texas, and
mhm,
seemingly funny, but completely not funny.
mhm.
They're like, "Hey, yeah, I did ayahuasca on Saturday. I'm a shaman on Sunday." I'm like, "No, you're not. Like, this takes a long time to train and learn how to use the medicine.
Yeah.
Really, it's not good." And kind of in that same kind of like, you're not, is also a lot of people who are doing medicine, but then they go home afterward, whether it's a clinical setting or with a shaman or a guide, whatever it is. Hopefully, it's someone well trained and educated and they knows that
Right.
setting, but whatever the context is, then they're sent home and there's like
Mhm.
nothing for them afterwards. And just as bad as the Saturday shaman, this guy who does ayahuasca on Saturdays, a shaman on Sunday, I think it's a problem. And I'm really happy that there are people like you doing the integration work. Talk to us about how, agree with me, because if you do the work, like why it's so
Mhm.
important to have the full context when someone's doing the medicine work, including the integration.
Oh, for sure. And I agree with you. Integration takes a while. And there's no finite number of days or hours. It really is an ongoing process. Definitely preparation for the medicine can be helpful for somebody to make sure that they are optimizing as much as they can going into the medicine. So physically, Howard, the vessel that you're providing, essentially, like are you, maybe it's titrating off of medications. Maybe it's cleaning up your diet a little bit, and there are some plant medicines that have a strict diete, and I mean, there's absolutely a course of preparation, but also mindset, doing the mindset work, setting intentions, and this is, I mean, intentions, from my perspective, they're an anchor. They anchor you in the preparation, they anchor you during the journey, and then they anchor you during the integration. So an intention, I think there's a lot of people that they know the word, but in the context, it's a little bit of a mystery. So what I do is I frame it against an expectation.
Okay.
So if somebody comes in and they have, maybe some distressing, um, emotional regulation type symptom, like rage, and they're desperate. Okay, I just can't get mad anymore. Well, that's not realistic, right? Because all of our emotions are part of our human emotion wheel, right? At some point they're gonna come up. So it's not about the specific emotion, it's digging a little bit deeper. They're like, well, what's going on there? And maybe it's just even asking, well, what's the opposite of that rage feeling, right? And getting them to think about it a little differently. When did you start feeling like this? When did this become problem? Sometimes people know, sometimes people don't. And that the
Yeah.
point isn't that they have all the answers. Getting them to understand what role this rage plays for them, because it does play a role, or substance use, or panic attacks, right?
Mhm.
Even things like say a physical diagnosis, something like MS,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? There's absolutely a toll and an influence in how they're showing up, and how they are perceiving themselves. And so doing some of that work to help them shape, like, well, it's not about some punch list afterward of, running a marathon or hitting them, however many dollars kind of thing. It's, how would you feel emotionally? What state of being would you be in? Right? That is what we are trying to inform. And even if they've been maybe unwell or are injured for a very long time, still just even coming at it from like, you know what? I don't know the last time I woke up feeling peace,
Mm.
but I would love to feel peace.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Okay, we're going to anchor on that. And just as an example, like when they go through the journey and maybe they're feeling some anxiety, right? Questions, which I think is like shows healthy respect for what they're about to do, that as part of the letting go, right? Which, also like to explain, letting go is not some sort of, like kind of fake Zen, or like, like you don't care kind of state. It's acknowledging the fear. It's acknowledging the questions, and it's still surrendering to whatever the journey is going to be,
Mhm.
using tools like your intentions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Anchoring on that positive, beautiful thing that you're like, I don't know what it looks like, but that's what I'm here for. Also, tools like breath,
Yeah.
right, are also part of the preparation. Breath work, grounding skills, things of that nature. Some of which is, I mean, it's used heavily in the therapeutic space, right? So I think the language incorporates really well. And then afterward, with the integration, what's tempting sometimes is for some folks to ignore the integration because they feel like they feel really great coming out, or they feel like they just want to savor, which is, rightfully so. Sometimes that's the appropriate move. The issue though is that there's a period of time, specifically with ibogaine, after medicine, where there is a softening of sorts. There is a neuroplasticity
Yeah. Yeah.
window. And so it's important to, almost immediately.
Activate.
Okay,
Yeah.
exactly. The integration model I use is it's a holistic, practical one, centers on physical health, mental health, spiritual health, connection, like relationships, and the environment. So you're
Yeah.
outdoors. So bringing in small incremental steps to build some momentum as part of that integration. Some people enter integration and they know exactly what they need to do. Sometimes that's pretty obvious. Like if they were addicted to a substance, clearly they can't be around the substance. Other times it's much more subtle. And so sometimes it starts with like, well, I'm just going to start taking care of myself. I'm just going to create this platform to just feel good every day. I'm going to feel healthy every day. I'm going to start managing my stress, my sleep hygiene. I'm going to experiment. I'm going to explore. And that can foster really beautiful integrations. Um, you asked the question about, just why is integration important?
Yeah.
Integration, yes, is a bridge from the preparation, the actual medicine journey into establishing new healthy patterns,
Mhm, mhm.
continuing to process trauma, perhaps,
Yeah.
um, continuing a sobriety journey,
Yeah.
right? And so when we think about integration, it's not just a like, and you do it, and there's 2 sessions after your, your journey or something like that. It's what is the first, what does this one week look like, right?
Mm.
What does the next month look like? What does the next 6 months look like? And so on. How am I going to create momentum to live my life just better, increase quality of life, increased health, however I might define that, increased peace, however I might define that. What needs to be true? What needs to not be true? And the f- the risk here with folks that go through psychedelic journeys and they don't do integration um, is that they'll eventually end up back in old patterns and old routines because our brains are wired for pattern and recognition and things like that. And so eventually you find yourself back into the same stressful conversations or relationships or maybe it's something you can't avoid, right? Like somebody you're related to
Yeah.
or your work,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? Um, how are you going to navigate that if you haven't really practiced? There hasn't been any specific reflection forward into how you would like to approach that differently, how you would like to feel on the other side of those interactions.
I love that. A framework that I use when I talk about these things is
Hmm.
for some people, you take the medicine and whatever the thing is like gone, it's healed, it's behind you.
Hmm.
You're literally in a different way of being in the world,
Hmm.
whatever the thing was. A second,
Yes.
like maybe halfway through the thing, and there still needs to be some work to be done to get you to the other side of whatever that means for the issue.
Right.
And the third one's like the door open, you peek, like, oh, there's another way of being in the world and
Yeah.
close. There's a lot.
Yes. Hmm.
Integration for me is like what with whatever the thing is, it could be all three or a combination of the two,
Yeah.
depending on the experience, is like it can be jarring to like you create a whole life around the thing and it's gone. Holy moly. And your spouse expects you to relate to her or him in a certain way and your kids it can be disruptive to everyone to literally
Yes.
be healed. Like, or the second thing
Hmm.
is like I work my way halfway through it.
Hmm.
It still has an effect on the people around me because then now I'm not
Yes.
hung up as they fully expected me to. Like I saw some of
Hmm.
the old patterning, but it's not as like the driver. And then, of course, the third one's like, yeah, I saw that there's opportunity.
Right.
Yeah. Talk to me about on the integration side, how we need to consider the family members, the wife or the husband,
Mm,
kids, friends, coworkers, because they also will be affected by the medicine too.
absolutely. The it affects the ecosystem,
Yeah.
however that's defined, and specifically in families, the partners, children, where you're sharing a home, you're sharing a space, very different type of relationships. What can happen to you, to your point, this person, maybe has a remarkable experience, maybe say something like addiction, right? Where they come out of this retreat and they feel amazing. They have no desire at all to use or to partake. And they come back into their home and everybody's so excited. At the same time, they're also holding their breath
Yeah.
because this probably isn't the first time that the client, right, has tried something and maybe it like it just it didn't grab hold or it only lasted for a little while. And so there's this kind of like this posture, like where everybody's sort of like this, with, like a smile, everybody seems like tense though. Um, because they want to believe it's going to work, but they don't know what to do with themselves. And so when somebody's coming back in, and again, even if it's just like this beautiful healing and this person's coming in and they're like, I want to exercise, I want to eat healthy, I want to really take care of my body. I'm so sorry. They're apologizing. They're accepting the responsibility for their decisions and the effect it had on their family. There's still a reckoning that has to happen. And it's not to bum anybody out, I mean, it's still like, because this is all about progress. This is all about integration. But yes, it might be um, for the family member just sort of watching and see what happens the first week and then the second week. And one of the things I do, Michael, is I do work with spouses and partners that their
Nice.
loved one has gone through the retreat. And so there's some similarities there with, I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Or my kids, especially like the older they are, like teenagers, they still won't accept that she is, says that they're on the right path now, and they're healing. And there's a lot of trust to be rebuilt
Yeah.
for sure. But I also like to normalize how the family members are feeling.
Good.
Like, yes, like I understand that you would feel tense, or you feel, now that the first week has gone by and the excitement has come down. Now, there's some things that are coming up for you. You're mad.
Yeah.
You're angry.
Yeah.
You're starting to total things up because there wasn't any space for that person to do it before. And especially in the role of a spouse, or a partner, sometimes they can become caregivers,
Yep.
something they never signed up for. And they've become a caregiver for their partner. And there's potential for bitterness if it's not already taken root. There's potential there for it to come forward.
I'm so happy to hear that as a trained marriage therapist. It's not criminal, but it's almost immoral or criminal not to recognize the
Mm,
impact it's going to have on the wife, the husband, the kids. And even if it's sustainable change, still
mm,
have to, the reckoning, you still have to do the consequences of the previous behavior on trust and those various things built
right.
up the person, the partner, and the children.
Hmm.
So I'm really happy that that is part of
Yes.
the work that you do too. Is that,
Yes.
do you find that with other people in the integration space? Are they taught to think that way like you? Is that part of the training and the what you hear from your colleagues?
I think more and more, it's becoming, there's much more of a conversation around the ecosystem, right?
Good.
So this person is going to have to move back into their their home life,
Yeah.
if and thinking preemptively, and coaching the client on this as well. You might come back from your retreat, and your spouse is still going to be mad at you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your spouse is still going to be debating separating from you,
Yeah.
right? Your 18-year-old child may still not be talking to you. Like, how are you going to move through this? And again, this is where I believe intentions can be really helpful,
Mhm.
right? Instead of building any expectation on an emotional outcome or somebody else's behavior, I'm going to show up, and I'm going to model as much as I can, and recognizing I'm going to make mistakes. I may not get it right all the time,
Yep.
but I'm going to show up as healthy as an example as I can. And hopefully that will build trust by example. And there's more conversation like that happening within the field, fortunately.
Good.
And just recognizing that when that's fostered for a client, they're more likely to maybe have reflected on this, or even maybe even had a conversation with their partner or their spouse, or maybe older children, before they even go through the retreat,
Nice.
and having an honest conversation about, this is what the situation is. This is what I'm hopeful,
Mhm.
it will look like on the other side. And I don't know, but I want you there, right? I want this family, or this relationship, or whatever it might be. We can talk about it more when we get back. And I think that extends, this beautiful olive branch,
Mhm.
without setting any sort of expectations, and also understanding that the medicine doesn't change a person's, personality. You know what I mean? You still fundamentally are who you are, and helping them separate, okay, what are my natural inclinations
Mhm.
who am I wired to be
Mhm.
versus this pain or this addiction
Yeah,
or this traumatic injury that sort of forced me into this box and somebody I didn't want to be. And how can I remove the walls here? How can I ask my family to help me in this process or be part of this process with me? It also is I also encourage a lot of partners and spouses, parents even with this as well. Go do your own work. It doesn't have to be plant medicine. It can if that's what feels right or you feel called. However, there's lots of different vehicles for healing.
yeah,
And this may be a call for you to finally do your own healing now that
that's
like
great.
your loved one has some space. Now you really need to take some space for yourself and begin to like think about like, well, we've been married for 20 years and for 15 of them, like this has been the scenario. I don't know who I am anymore.
Yeah,
Like, right. And so there's this identity development that can also happen for both partners, for all of the family members, this idea of like, okay, if we're released, if everybody got released in some way, what's something healthy that we can put in here in its place?
Yeah, I love that. And plus, just looking at it socioculturally, it's an opportunity to stop
Mhm.
the transmission of, you know, behaviors we don't necessarily want the next
Yeah,
generation to continue.
right.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's such a beautiful point because so much of this, when people go through medicine, and I mean, I witnessed this myself as part of my own medicine journeys, is the generational chains that are just perpetuated
yeah,
in through family lines and for a very, very, very long time. And they don't know what the family looks like without them.
yeah, right.
And so being able to see that, like, oh, I am responding to this chain basically that's
Mhm.
held my entire family, like all of my ancestors down.
Yep.
I have an opportunity to break it. And you're right, you use the example of somebody being scared to look through the window. Yeah, that can be intimidating.
Mhm, mhm.
However, it can also be really exciting.
And freeing. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe
All
get
of
to author. Yes.
yeah.
Yes, all of it. And what a beautiful opportunity to recognize, yes, that's the origin, but this is actually the direction
Wh-
that
which
to
is
go.
fascinating because, like,
Hmm.
biographically, one could have the experience, like, oh, when I was 7, or even in utero, this thing
Right.
occurred, set the stage
Hmm.
for my nervous system begin to respond or react in this particular way, and
Right.
it manifests in these different behaviors with these
Hmm.
people over time. Or it's like, oh, like my great 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 grandmother had this experience, and I see it through the lineage,
Yes.
and I can see where it initiated, and I can watch it go down the family path, like, through the
Hmm.
ancestors to me, because I was
Yes.
an egg in my mother who was then in utero with her mother. Like, it's like you can
Yes.
track all the way back. But even that sounds kind of woo woo, but it's, I would imagine, I know this is a fact. The scientists, the Western scientists are
Hmm.
actually proving this to be true. There's some research being done, or it has already been done with the Holocaust survivors. That
Yes.
the epigenetic changes as a result of
Hmm.
experiences being transmitted. So it's not so
Hmm.
woo, but maybe the woo woo part is like I actually could see it and experience it in my own consciousness while on the medicine.
Right.
That's
Yes.
cool and a little bit crazy for the conventional medical and psychiatric and psychological system to try to understand, like, what do you mean you saw
Yeah.
yourself in utero, or you saw your great grandmother,
Hmm.
and how this behavior initiated? You're talking about a whole different paradigm.
Right.
This area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that science is catching up to, I think, what a lot of um, shamanistic plant
Mhm.
medicine uh, based cultures, they knew, right? And even cultures that didn't use plant medicine necessarily, they knew. It was just sort of intuitive that you could just witness it happening. And if you just got quiet, if you were still, if you paid attention, you could see the pattern.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like that's also, as in our modern society, we're going constantly. And so slowing down isn't encouraged, it's actually discouraged.
Yeah.
And so in the process of having that type of alignment, that type of social philosophy, we leave behind our own intuition.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to your point about just like somebody questioning, well, how could you see that? Well, how do you know that that's not possible to see? How do you know that it's not real? It's worth the conversation,
Yeah.
right? What if I could go back and prove that this systemic abuse took place at every single I mean, as far back as I could?
Yeah. Yeah.
Would that convince you? Right? Like, and so there's a certain amount of this that, and I think this is part of the incredible space because it is so individual, right? The medicine is benevolent, it meets you where you're at, and it gives you what you need, right? And this idea of you're going to show up and it's going to meet you where you're at, not me, not the guy next to you.
Yeah.
And it's going to allow you to work within your own experiences, your own space, your own psyche, your own spirit.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a beautiful space to
Mhm.
do the healing when you know that you're being held so wonderfully, but then also on the other side that there's yes, there's work to do. I mean, I'm not even going to play there with the integration. Yes, there's work to do for many of us. Um, However, it can be exciting if you choose to see it that way. If you choose to see it as a discovery, as a trial and error
Mhm.
experiment,
Yeah.
right? That it's just starting fresh every day.
Yeah. 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 I love that. Now, people are listening to this and saying, "Okay, I'm planning on working with someone to do a
Hmm.
medicine session, and we're not encouraging them to break federal or state or whatever laws. What they're
Right.
doing their thing, cool." And they're like, "But the person I'm working with doesn't do integration. They just run the
Hmm.
session. They're a sitter. Hopefully, good set setting." How does that person go from that situation to finding a Beth to work with to help them with the integration?
Well, there's different organizations like MAPS has there's a like a finder tool on their website. There are different organizations that will help somebody
Fine.
find that support. And it's exciting, but there's more and more people like me that
Yeah.
are stepping forward that are they actually have, you know, businesses like it's a functioning coaching business. Um, if that's what somebody desires, if they want somebody with a more of a therapeutic framework, that's available. If they want somebody that is in a more kind of like natural shamanistic framework, that's available. And so it's actually really exciting for that people can find coaches now. When I feel like even just a few years ago, it was a little hit and miss on
Oh,
what you were going to find if you just went into Google.
yeah.
you know, and now, I mean, now you can find, research in Google Scholar. There's legitimate practitioners that just they genuinely they come at this from an ethical
Yeah.
and theoretical framework that's designed around somebody healing from trauma or substance use or whatever that might be.
How does someone find you specifically? Work
Well,
with you?
they can find me. So I do have a website, and I can share that with you. It's findyournewday.com. So I
Okay.
can be contacted through that website. And I offer, as I mentioned before, sort of a therapeutic framework for coaching. So bringing in, it's not therapy, but
Mm.
bringing in some of those just really solid tools that a well trained therapist has in terms of the listening and the support and the person centered care, in addition to actually thinking about this as like, okay, the integration, like now what do we have to do here to maybe get some momentum. So if anybody wants to reach out, I would love to have conversations, even just checking in to see if is this for me. If you're going to do a psychedelic medicine, I would say yes, please seek some sort of integration preparation and integration support if that's something that you're interested in doing. But also, there's no harm in just having an exploratory conversation either, and you know, figuring out like what does this look like?
And let me strongly encourage that. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I'm sure that you can be a Terrence McKenna psychonaut, do 5 grams, and you start the day
Yes.
and do your thing.
Hmm.
Cool. Let me encourage most people are not like that, not him.
No.
Integration.
Mm-mm.
Probably he should have integration too, but I've just used
Hmm.
him as an exemplar. Of,
Yeah.
but most people, I would say, would really benefit if they're going to do the medicine. And let me encourage the right setting, a good guide,
Hmm.
medicine's clean, like all the safety things are in place. You don't have a psychiatric condition that's counter to the medicine. You don't have a physical condition.
Right.
All that stuff's really important. And then call a Beth you after the fact to integrate all the experiences into your life.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. A call a Beth. I like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
You might do tag. But yes, I appreciate the way that you brought that all together. Yes, please just for for your own support, right? To foster the healing process. Don't do it alone. Nobody needs to do it alone. Nobody needs to white knuckle it or muscle their way through. Uh, find support, qualified support to guide you and just be part of that supportive container.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate your time,
Yeah.
expertise, and educating us on the importance of integration post psychedelic session.
Yeah, my pleasure, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.